Here's a fun article for everybody. This is in The Hill. World one step from nuclear annihilation, UN chief warns. Okay. That's not something that you like to see in the morning when you wake up. So, Secretary General Antonio Guterres sounded the alarm over the war in Ukraine, nuclear threats in Asia and the Middle East, and other tensions, warning that humanity is just one misunderstanding, one miscalculation away from nuclear annihilation. The warning came Monday as a pandemic-delayed conference opened to review the 50-year-old Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is aimed at preventing the spread of nuclear weapons and eventually achieving a nuclear-free world. The threat of nuclear catastrophe was also raised by the United States, Japan, Germany, the UN, nuclear chief, and many other opening speakers. Russia, which came under criticism from some speakers, didn't give its address in its scheduled slot Monday, but was expected to speak Tuesday. China's representative was scheduled to speak Tuesday. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said North Korea is preparing to conduct its 7th nuclear test. Iran has either been unwilling or unable to accept a deal to return to the 2015 nuclear agreement. Oh, please. We're the one who destroyed that deal. And Russia is engaged in reckless, dangerous saber rattling. So let me pause here for a second. I sincerely believe in the conversation about nuclear annihilation. The stuff about North Korea and the stuff about Iran is way on the back burner. The real threat when it comes to nuclear annihilation, U.S. and Russia, that's probably number one. Just below that, U.S. and China, that's probably number two. Or actually, I'll take that back. Tied for number two is U.S. and China and India and Pakistan, where it is maybe. And then right underneath that is probably like some rogue actors being able to get like black market nukes, which is a real concern. So for them to bring up North Korea and Iran is kind of standard, American misdirection. They're not the biggest threat. There's no world in which they would launch aggressively, offensively launch the strike. Because they're sort of rinky-dink countries and they're really not that powerful. And, they understand what the consequences of pressing that button would be, namely the total destruction of them. So they wouldn't do it. I think it's a little different and more complex with other states, namely the ones I mentioned. He cited Russian President Vladimir Putin's warning after its February 24th invasion that any attempt to interfere would lead to, quote, consequences you have never seen. I remember that. That was terrifying. Emphasizing that his country is one of the most potent nuclear powers. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said divisions in the world since the last review conference in 2015, which ended without a consensus document, have become greater, adding that Russia's threat to use nuclear weapons in the Ukraine war has contributed to worldwide concern that yet another catastrophe by nuclear weapon use is a real possibility. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock said Moscow's reckless nuclear rhetoric since its invasion of its smaller neighbor is putting at risk everything the NPT has achieved in 5 decades. So, look, I mean, here's the gist of it, and this is the point that I wanted to really highlight for everybody. We do generally have a false sense of security about the state of the world. We do feel like things will remain relatively stable, and we'll kind of figure it out as we go along, even though we got all this corruption, we got climate change, we got all these problems. There's authoritarianism is running rampant in a variety of ways throughout the world, including in the U.S. in many respects. But there's this sense of we'll figure it out. But I don't think people truly understand that, we really are playing with fire, and they're real. The idea of stability is a total mirage. Total mirage. There absolutely can be some sort of misunderstanding, miscalculation, or issue that leads to a nuclear war. And in that case, it would be a rude awakening. It would be a very rude awakening to a gigantic number of people that, things weren't as stable as we all sort of default assumed. And when you have the UN warning that we're one step from nuclear annihilation, you have that doomsday clock, which is, probably super close to midnight. Take that seriously. Take that seriously. I mean, what's needed, and I don't want to sound all cheesy and corny and kumbaya bullshit on you guys right now, but what's needed is a much greater dedication to diplomacy and negotiation and de-escalation. And unfortunately, the incentives are all out of whack in a million different ways. whether it's the military-industrial complex in the U.S. and the rampant profits that are made, and the politicians who are bought by those companies, and I mean that's a huge problem. Authoritarian governments, larger countries invading smaller countries, or whether it's Russia and Ukraine or China and Taiwan, or our endless number of incursions and interventions and wars, whether it be in the Middle East or attempted coups in Venezuela, etc., Syria. I mean, you guys know the deal. It's all super dangerous, super, super dangerous. And I just feel like humanity at this moment is really not up to the challenge and hasn't evolved to the point where we are sane or stable enough to have the capacity to destroy everything and everybody with the press of a button. So anyway, take this warning seriously, because it is serious. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.